Hi guys, it's Victoria and welcome back to FemmeHead. Today we're going to talk about PMDD. So PMDD, or premenstrual dysphoric disorder, is often described as a more serious form of PMS, premenstrual syndrome. I always found that definition of it a bit confusing, and misleading is not the right word, but that's the one that comes to mind. Because when I think of PMS, I think of the physical symptoms of PMS, the acne, the bloating, the cramping, the tender breasts, the headaches, like all that sort of stuff. PMDD is more than that. And that's what finally helped me make the link. And I wasn't even like, oh, maybe I have PMDD. It was more, what's going on? And that led me down the road to being like, this actually sounds like PMDD. I have always, you can ask my mom, I have always gotten very irritable leading up to my period. And that's something that since a teenager, since getting my period, has always been true for me. But things changed after having the boys, and hormones are a crazy thing. And so I think just things happened with my hormones, being pregnant, giving birth, postpartum, all that 2 times round. Things were happening and I was like, this doesn't feel like normal for me. So how does PMDD differ from PMS? Both have physical and psychological symptoms, but PMDD will cause extreme mood shifts, more of the psychological stuff that disrupt your day-to-day life, your relationships, and isn't necessarily super manageable to live with. And it's said that 5 to 8% of menstruating people have PMDD. I've also heard that there is a connection between people who have ADHD and PMDD. That if you have ADHD, you're more likely to have PMDD. We're going to get into this a bit more, very detailed, and I'm going to include an article for you to read through if you're curious. But the short version of it, with PMDD, at least one of these 4 symptom categories are present. So the first one is sadness or hopelessness. Check for me. Number 2 is anxiety or tension. Once again, check. I have anxiety, but it would get just so much worse in my luteal phase. Number 3, extreme moodiness. Check, check, and check. And number 4 is marked irritability or anger. Check. For some of us, it can be one of those things. For some of us, it can be all of those things. This happens in a cyclical pattern, you notice it before your period and it kind of decreases and goes away as you start your period. And you're not going to experience these things cycle around. If you do, it's probably something else. They don't really know what causes PMDD, but it could be from an abnormal reaction to the hormonal changes during our menstrual cycle, which can cause a serotonin deficiency. Like I said before, those with PMDD will notice the symptoms and the change, the maybe week or 2 leading up to their period, and then they go away once their period starts. And these symptoms and this experience during your luteal phase is noticeably different than any other part of your cycle. And I always said it was a switch would go off as soon as I ovulated. It was a switch went off, and then as soon as my period started, a switch would go off again, and I would be back to normal. So the most common symptoms, I'm gonna put this picture down below, but I'll also kind of put it up here. For me, it was the psychological category that really made me start digging deeper, because the physical things, I don't have very many physical symptoms when it comes to the luteal phase and leading up to my period. But for me, it was the psychological things that were getting to me. Like I said, I have always been extremely irritable leading up to my period. Moodiness, crying was always common for me as well. I wrote that off to PMS, being a woman, having a period, having a cycle, all that good jazz. But after having the kids, I noticed other things. I was easily agitated and angered. I felt depressed and hopeless, and I questioned big life decisions. I would only question and think these things in that time period before my period, before I started menstruating. It was like crazy things like, did I make this huge mistake having kids? Was I not meant to have kids? Like if I just like messed up my life having kids, maybe I shouldn't be married. Maybe like should have gone down a completely different career path. Like crazy big life decisions I questioned, as well as like questioning those to myself because I never voiced them. These questions would pop in my head and I'd be like, huh. But then like right after that, I would be like, I would feel so guilty for even having those thoughts cross my mind because like I'm obsessed with my boys. I wanted children. Like I wanted them. I love them. Like I would be destroyed if like something ever happened to them. And so like in my right mind, the rest of my cycle, like I knew I had made the right decision with all of these things, but it was like there was this little voice, or not even like a little voice, there was just like these thoughts during my luteal phase where I'm like, hey, maybe you fucked up. And it would just like, it felt crazy. Like I don't know quite how to describe it. Poor self-image, paranoid. Like honestly, I ticked most of the boxes in that psychological category, and like seeing it laid out there in front of you, I was like, that's interesting that all these things line up and all these things point to this. Okay, so how does PMDD get diagnosed if you're like, these things sound similar, I like something's felt off, or like I've never quite felt right the week or so before my period? And this is where we're gonna get a little more like detailed and clinical. I'll attach this medical article I'm gonna go over, but it's from the NIH. If you want to like go through it more detailed, or like go through it, circle things and take it to your doctor. It depends on like what you're experiencing, with the kind of the route you'll go through. Definitely just start with your general practitioner, whoever that may be. You know, they might go over your medical history, do a little exam, ask you questions. Either they can evaluate you for any of like the mental health side of things, or they can refer you to someone else. And I found it was really helpful to just like write it all out. Every time I experienced something that I thought maybe this could be like that didn't feel right or felt off, I would write it down. And I also wrote down like any like questions or concerns or like any thoughts I had, like basically anything related to it. I just kept in a little like notes on my phone. Like I came prepared to my appointments, like, you know, when they're like, what's going on, or why do you think that something's wrong or whatever, I was like, well, and I like shook out my scroll. I was like, these are all the reasons. I felt like that was really helpful. And like I'm the sort of person where like in the moment I can't think on the spot. I have to plan and prepare ahead of time. So if you're like me, it's helpful. Let's get to the NIH article. According to them, there are a few criteria that need to be met to, you know, be diagnosed with it. I'm gonna look at this because just like the language of it is not how I normally talk, so I want to make sure I say it. The first criteria, at least 5 of the following 11 symptoms, which I'm gonna read through all of them. You have at least 5 of the 11 symptoms, and you have at least 1 of the first 4 that we'll go over. The first one, markedly depressed mood, feeling of hopelessness or self-deprecating thoughts. 2, marked anxiety, tension, feelings of being keyed up or on edge. Number 3 is marked affective lability. And I had to look this one up because I was like, is that a typo? Did I like not copy that correctly? But this is the tendency to experience strong and variable emotions. So that roller coaster. And then the 4th one, where you need to have 1 of the first 4, persistent and marked anger or irritability or increased interpersonal conflicts. 5, decreased interest in usual activities such as work, school, friends, and hobbies. 6, subjective sense of difficulty in concentrating. 7, lethargy, easy fatigability or marked lack of energy. 8 is changes in appetite, overeating, or having specific food cravings. 9 is hypersomnia or insomnia, so issues sleeping. 10, a subjective sense of being overwhelmed or out of control. And then 11 is other physical symptoms such as breast tenderness or swelling, headaches, joint or muscle pain, a sensation of bloating, or weight gain. So that's the first like criteria of like, you have to meet 5 of these, 1 of the first 4. And then The second criteria, criterion B, symptoms severe enough to interfere significantly with social, occupational, sexual, or scholastic functioning. Criterion C, symptoms discretely related to the menstrual cycle and must not merely represent an exacerbation of the symptoms of another disorder, such as major depressive disorder, panic disorder, dysphoric disorder. I didn't pronounce that one right, I'm sure. A personal disorder, although the symptoms may be superimposed on those of these disorders. I feel like that one's worded confusingly, but anyways. Criterion D is that criteria A, B, and C are all confirmed by prospective daily ratings during at least two consecutive symptomatic menstrual cycles. So you're like tracking it over 2 cycles and you're, checking them off when you're checking in daily with yourself, sort of thing. The diagnosis may be made provisionally before this confirmation. Okay, so that's the criteria from that article I was talking about. Treatment options for PMDD, because it's serious and it's chronic and it's not something that will just go away on its own if you ignore it. So these may help relieve or decrease how much you're experiencing or how bad the symptoms are for you. The first one is changes in diets. So it says increase your protein and carbs while cutting down on things like sugar, salts, caffeine, and alcohol. All the yummy things. Regular exercise, which we all know, that's good things for us. Stress management, meditation, journaling, therapy, avoiding situations or people that stress you out. There's lots of good info online about stress management. Supplements such as B6, calcium, and magnesium, anti-inflammatory medicines, and then SSRIs. Going through this list, I've always noticed a big difference in my period and my luteal phase depending on my diet. If I'm having a lot of salt and sugar and caffeine and alcohol and all that, I feel worse, my skin breaks out, just the symptoms are more noticeable for me. Going along with that, if I am making an effort to have some sort of exercise or move my body, I feel better. And I'm not currently the best with either of those, so this is a good reminder to get it together, Victoria. And then an SSRI has helped dramatically with the slew of the psychological things we went over. It has made such a noticeable difference in my luteal phase. To end this, everyone is different and you know yourself best. If something feels off or weird or not right or unmanageable, if you feel like you need help, seek it, advocate for yourself. Sometimes I feel, especially for menstruating people, you have to go through the ringer to get taken seriously, and not just have it written off as oh, well, that's just part of having a period and having a menstrual cycle. And just suck it up, buttercup. Hopefully this helps some of you out there, or maybe you've learned something, and if a friend brings something else up, you can be you know what, I just watched this video where she was talking about PMDD, blah, 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 and you can help someone else out. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye!